Can you name the 12 disciples? What else do you know about them? Learn something new.
Do you remember Andrew? Not many people do. He's only mentioned 12 times in the entire New Testament, and 4 of those times are simply lists of the 12 apostles. However, he was the first apostle to be called by Jesus and the first to call Jesus the Messiah. He was born in Bethsaida on the Sea of Galilee, the brother of Simon Peter and the son of a man named Jonah. Like his brother and his father, he was a fisherman by trade. John 1:41-42. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, We have found the Messiah, which is, being interpreted, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And when Jesus beheld him, he said, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas, which is by interpretation, a stone. Andrew is an example to all of us of what a missionary should be. Can you imagine if Andrew was too afraid to tell his older brother about Jesus? Are there people you are afraid to tell about Jesus?
Bartholomew. He was also called Nathaniel by John. Like the rest of the disciples, Bartholomew saw the resurrected Jesus. But what else is he known for? John 1:45-51. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip saith unto him, Come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael saith unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw you under the fig tree, you believe me. Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. This prophecy came true when Nathanael saw Jesus ascend into heaven. James the Great was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. He was in Jesus' inner circle along with his brother John and Peter. He was called the Great, or the Elder, because he was older than the other James, who was also called James the Lesser. So, how did James become a disciple? Matthew 4:21-22. Going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father, Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Would you just drop all your plans for the future and follow a stranger? Amazingly, that's what it means to be a Christian. But James didn't always have the right attitude. When Jesus was rejected by a Samaritan village, James and his brother said, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? But he turned and rebuked them and said, You do not know what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. Another time they said unto him, Grant unto us that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left hand, in your glory. But Jesus said unto them, You know not what you ask. Can you drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And Jesus said unto them, You shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized with shall you be baptized. They didn't know it, but Jesus was speaking of their deaths. James the Lesser was called James the son of Alphaeus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts. But was he also the Lord's brother? Both Matthew and Mark list James as one of Jesus' brothers. along with Joseph, Judas, and Simon. However, they weren't the best of brothers. John 7, 3-5. Jesus' brothers said to him, "Leave Galilee and go to Judea, so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world." For even his brothers did not believe in him. Fortunately, their attitude changed. Two of Jesus' brothers, James and Jude, wrote letters that appear in the New Testament. James became especially well known as a pillar of the church, and perhaps the very first bishop in Jerusalem. Paul also writes about James, calling him both an apostle and Jesus' brother. Galatians 1:19. I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brother. Early church fathers, Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria, both believed that James was in fact Jesus' biological brother. Writing in the 3rd century, Origen of Alexandria believed James and Jesus were just stepbrothers. By the 4th century, St. Jerome concluded that they were just cousins. Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christians believe that James was not the biological brother of Christ because Mary remained a virgin her whole life. Some say there was a third James, James the Just, who was the brother of Christ, the author of the book of James, and the first bishop of Jerusalem. Whoever he was, the author of the book of James never claimed special status for being an apostle or a brother of Christ. Instead, he described himself as James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ.
John was one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. He was in Jesus' inner circle, along with his brother James and Peter. He wrote the Gospel of John, along with 3 epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the book of Revelation. Thought to be the beloved disciple mentioned in John's Gospel, John was present at many special moments in Jesus' life, including the Transfiguration and the Crucifixion. Matthew 17, 1 and 2. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. John 19, 25-27. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. John was also a fisherman, like his brother, and wanted to call down fire on those who rejected Christ. But after being rebuked by Jesus, he really learned his lesson. And like his brother, he wanted to sit next to Jesus in his kingdom. But Jesus warned him that he would drink of the cup of persecution. Judas is probably best known as the disciple who betrayed Jesus. It's amazing to think that he lived with Jesus for 3 years, saw him perform countless miracles, experienced his divine love, and then betrayed him. So why did he do it? He was a thief. When a woman broke an expensive bottle of perfume to anoint Jesus, Judas said it was a waste because it could have been sold to feed the poor. This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the bag and bear what was put therein. John 12:6. Later, Judas went to the chief priests and said unto them, "What will ye give me? And I will deliver him unto you." And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Matthew 26:15. This fulfilled a 500-year-old prophecy found in Zechariah 11:13. And the Lord said unto me, "Cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them." And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Did Jesus know Judas would betray him? Matthew 26, 24, and 25.
The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi?" Jesus answered, "You have said so." Luke 22:48. But Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Jude, also known as Judas or Thaddeus, was one of the 12 apostles. To avoid confusion with Judas Iscariot, English Bibles shorten his name to Jude. But that's not the only thing confusing about Jude. There is another Jude, the brother of James and Christ, who wrote the book of Jude. Or are they the same guy? It's a bit of a mystery. Apostolic Father Papias Hieropolis, who lived circa 70 to 163 AD, believed that they were the same guy. The Golden Legend, written in the Middle Ages, identifies Jude with Thaddeus and the brother of James the Less, but not the brother of Christ. Modern scholars just don't know. At the Last Supper, Jude asked Jesus, "Lord, how is it that you will reveal yourself to us and not to the world?" John 14:22 and 23. Like the rest of the disciples, Jude did not yet understand the part that he and all Christians would play in manifesting Christ to the world. Matthew was one of the 12 disciples who lived with Jesus and saw him resurrected. He is best known as the author of the Gospel of Matthew and the tax collector. At the time of Christ, tax collectors were greatly despised by the Jews because they were thought to be corrupt and traitors to their own people. And yet, Jesus went straight to the receipt of customs where Matthew was working and called him to be a disciple. Why? Matthew 9:13. "For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Simon Peter, also known as Cephas, was one of the 12 disciples and part of Jesus' inner circle. Peter, James, and John were the only 3 disciples to see the transfiguration of Jesus. And like James and John, Peter, along with his brother Andrew, was a lowly fisherman by trade. In Matthew 16:18, Jesus says, "I also tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." In one of the most poignant moments in the Bible, Peter tests his faith by walking on water, which doesn't end well for Peter. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus rebukes Peter, James, and John for falling asleep when they should have been praying. And when Jesus is arrested, Peter reacts with violence, cutting off the ear of a priest. Later, when he is accused of being a follower of Jesus, Peter denies him 3 times. Of all the disciples, Peter is probably the most relatable because he is flawed, just like us. After the resurrection, Peter is one of the first disciples to see Jesus, and from that point on, he becomes a pillar of the church. Philip was one of the original 12 disciples chosen by Jesus. He is associated with Peter and Andrew because he also came from Bethsaida. After calling Andrew and Peter, Jesus turned to Philip and said, "Follow me." Amazingly, he did, but not before running to tell his brother Nathaniel the good news. John 1:45-47. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said about him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit." Because of Philip's simple act of faith, his brother was saved. Later, when Jesus preaches to the 5,000, he tests Philip by asking him where they can buy food to feed the people. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." John 6:7. Philip's faith would grow as he took part in an amazing miracle, feeding 5,000 people with only 5 loaves and 2 small fish. At another time, Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you such a long time, and do you not know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How do you say, 'Show us the Father'?" John 14:8 and 9. The last time the Bible mentions Apostle Philip is after the Lord's ascension, when the disciples gather to pray in Jerusalem. There is another Philip in Acts, Philip the evangelist, who baptized an Ethiopian eunuch. He was not an apostle, but was a deacon and one of the 70 who were sent out by Christ to preach the gospel. Thomas, also called Didymus, which means twin in Greek, was one of the original 12 disciples chosen by Jesus. Thomas is best known as Doubting Thomas because he refused to believe that Jesus had risen from the dead. "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." John 20:25. But this wasn't the first time that Thomas doubted. When Lazarus died, Thomas said, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." John 11:16. And when Jesus said he must go to prepare a place for them in heaven, Thomas said, "Lord, we don't know where you are going. How can we know the way?" John 14:5. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared to Thomas personally, saying, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." John 20:28 and 29. From that day on, Thomas was a doubter no more. Simon is only mentioned in the lists of the 12 disciples, and there are no other stories about him in the New Testament. Some people believe he is the same Simon referred to as brother of Christ in Mark 6:3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? In which case he may or may not have been the second bishop of Jerusalem, who took over for James after he was martyred. The title of Zelotes could just refer to Simon's zeal and help differentiate him from Peter, whose name was also Simon. However, zealot is kaneos in Greek, which has led some to believe he was from Cana of Galilee. The Zealots were also a militant Jewish sect who wanted to expel the Romans from Israel by force. This has led some to believe that Simon may have been involved in the First Jewish-Roman War, 66 to 73 AD. Although not much else is said about Simon in the New Testament, there are numerous references to him in both church and secular history. Matthias was not one of the original 12 disciples. In the book of Acts, Luke describes how the church chose a replacement for Judas Iscariot, who had committed suicide. Acts 1:20-26. "For," said Peter, "it is written in the book of Psalms, 'May his place be deserted, let there be no one to dwell in it, and may another take his place of leadership.' Therefore, it is necessary to choose one of the men who have been with us the whole time the Lord Jesus was living among us, beginning from John's baptism to the time when Jesus was taken up from us. For one of these must become a witness with us of his resurrection." So they nominated 2 men, Joseph called Barsabas, also known as Justus, and Matthias. Then they prayed, "Lord, you know everyone's heart. Show us which of these 2 you have chosen to take over this apostolic ministry, which Judas left to go where he belongs." Then they cast lots, and a lot fell to Matthias,
So he was added to the 11 apostles. The choosing of Matthias was an important event in church history. First, it fulfilled a 1,000-year-old prophecy from the Psalms concerning Judas Iscariot. And secondly, it was the first major decision made by the early church that would have eternal consequences. Matthew 19:28. Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." St. Paul, formerly known as Saul of Tarsus, was not one of the original 12 disciples, but became an apostle later on. Saul of Tarsus was an angry man who sought to destroy the church. He even received letters from the Jewish leaders to track down Christians and have them arrested. However, while on the road to Damascus, he was struck blind by a vision of the resurrected Christ, who said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" After being healed by Ananias, the reborn Paul became God's chosen instrument to share the gospel to the Gentiles. He performed miracles, healing people, and even raising one man from the dead.
Hi, I'm David. Are you ready to take the test? Click on my YouTube channel and find the community tab, or just watch the next one.